Chapter 16 of 2 Years in the Forbidden City. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by J.C. Guan. 2 Years in the Forbidden City by Princess Deling. Chapter 16. The Summer Palace. Just about the end of the 9th moon, Her Majesty began to tire of doing nothing day after day, and said, "What is the use of waiting until the 1st of the month to have the theatrical performance? Let us have a performance tomorrow." So she gave instructions for the eunuchs to prepare for the play, which should be staged without the assistance of any outside actors. I might here mention that certain of the eunuchs were specially trained as actors, and used to study their parts every day. Indeed, they were far cleverer than the professionals from outside. Her Majesty gave the head eunuch the list of the plays she wished to be performed, which were for the most part dramatized fairy tales, and we had a performance the next day. After Her Majesty had gone to rest in the afternoon, during the theatrical performance, I met the Emperor returning to his own palace. I was surprised to see only one eunuch in attendance. This was the Emperor's own private eunuch, and he trusted him implicitly. He asked me where I was going, and I told him I was going to my room to rest a while. He remarked that he had not seen me for quite a long time, which made me laugh, as I saw him every morning at the audience. He said, "I don't get as much chance of chatting with you as formerly, since this portrait painting began. I am afraid I am not making much progress with my English, as I have nobody to help me now that your time is occupied with this lady artist. You appear to enjoy her company very much. All the same, I suppose it is very monotonous. Has she found out yet that you are there simply to keep an eye upon her?" I told him that I was very careful not to betray myself in any way, and that I did not think she suspected she was being watched. The Emperor then said, "I understand there is a rumor to the effect that when this lady has finished Her Majesty's portrait, she is going to paint mine. I should very much like to know who says so." I told him this was the first I had heard about it, so could not say. I asked him whether he would like to have his portrait painted, but he only answered, "That is rather a difficult question for me to answer. You know best whether I ought to have it painted or not." I see Her Majesty having so many photographs taken, and even the eunuchs are in the picture. I understood at once what he meant, so I asked him if he wished me to take him with my little kodak. He looked surprised and asked, "Can you take pictures too? If it is not too risky for us, we might try it some day when we have an opportunity. Don't forget, but I think we must be very careful." He then changed the conversation by saying, "Well, now that we have time to talk, I want to ask you a question, and I expect you to answer me truly. What is the general opinion amongst the foreigners regarding myself? Do they consider me a man of character, and do they think me clever? I am very anxious to know." Before I could say anything in answer to this question, he continued, "I know very well that they regard me as nothing more than a boy, and as being of no consequence at all. Tell me, is not this so?" I replied that many foreigners had asked me about him, as to what kind of man he was, but that they had never expressed any opinion of their own regarding him, excepting that they understood he was in the best of health. "If any wrong impression does exist regarding myself and my position at the court," continued the Emperor, "it is owing to the very conservative customs of the Chinese court. I am not expected to either say or do anything on my own initiative. Consequently, outsiders never hear much about me, and I am regarded as being nothing more than a figurehead. I know this is so. Whenever they ask you about me in the future, just explain to them exactly what my position here is. I have plenty of ideas regarding the development of this country, but you know I am not able to carry them out as I am not my own master. I don't think the Empress Dowager herself has sufficient power to alter the state of things existing in China at present, and even if she has, she is not willing to. I am afraid it will be a long time before anything can be done towards reform." The Emperor went on to say how nice it would be if he were allowed to travel about from place to place, the same as the European monarchs, but of course such a thing was out of the question for him. I told him that several princesses had expressed a wish to visit the St. Louis Exposition, and said I thought it would be a good thing if that could be arranged, as they would see for themselves the difference between their own country and customs and foreign countries and customs. The Emperor expressed doubts as to this permission being granted, as such a thing had never been heard of before. We talked for quite a long time, mostly about foreign customs, and the Emperor remarked that he would very much like to visit Europe and see for himself how things were carried on there. Just then one of my eunuchs came and said that Her Majesty was awake, so I had to hurry off to her room. We now arrive at the 10th moon. The first day it snowed, and the head eunuchs enquired of Her Majesty whether it was her intention to celebrate her birthday at the Summer Palace as usual. As previously explained, the Summer Palace was Her Majesty's favorite place of abode, so she replied in the affirmative, and arrangements were accordingly made for the celebration to be held there as usual. The head eunuch then brought Her Majesty a list giving the names and ranks of all the princesses and the names of the wives and daughters of the Manchu officials, and she selected those whom she wished to be present at the celebrations. On this occasion she selected 45 ladies, who were duly informed that she desired their presence at the Palace. I was standing behind Her Majesty's chair all this time, and she turned and said, "Usually I do not ask many people to my birthday celebrations, but on this occasion I have made an exception, as I want you to see the way they dress, and how ignorant they are of court etiquette." The celebrations commenced on the 6th day of the 10th moon. Miss Carl having returned to the American Legation in Peking for the time being, my mother, my sister and myself went back to the Palace again. Early on the morning of the 6th, the eunuchs decorated the verandas with different colored silks, and hung lanterns all over the place and amongst the trees. At about 7 o'clock in the morning the visitors began to arrive, and I quite agreed with what Her Majesty had told me about them. The eunuchs introduced them to all the court ladies, but they seemed to have very little to say, appearing very shy. They were then conducted to the waiting room, but there were so many of them that we court ladies had to stand outside on the veranda. Some of them were very expensively dressed, but their colors were, for the most part, very old-fashioned, and their manners very awkward. We watched them for quite a while, and then went off to report to Her Majesty. On such occasions as this, Her Majesty was generally in pretty good spirits. She commenced asking us a lot of questions. Amongst other things, she asked whether we had noticed an elderly lady among the visitors, dressed as a bride. She explained that this lady was the only Manchu lady present who was married to a Chinese official, and had been invited because of her previous connection with the court. Her Majesty said she had never seen her herself, but understood that she was a very clever woman. We had not noticed such a person, and suggested that perhaps she had not yet arrived. Her Majesty dressed very quickly, and as soon as she was ready she came into the hall, where the head eunuch brought in the visitors and presented them to Her Majesty. We court ladies were all standing in a row behind the throne. As they came in, some kowtowed, others curtsied, while others did not do anything at all. In fact, nobody appeared to know what to do with herself. Her Majesty spoke a few words of welcome, and thanked them for the presents they had sent her. I would like to say here that, contrary to the general idea which exists, Her Majesty always expressed